Thank you for inviting me. I've been asked to present what we do as industry and manufacturer to prevent medication errors, and particularly in the field of medical devices. And since I am not an expert in the field, I thank my colleague Ange Lievert for having given me the material for this presentation. So where is...
The easiest to see these two.
These two, thank you. So we've heard already a lot that about the definition of medication errors, but if we consider that medication errors are defined as occurring while the product is in the control of the healthcare professional, patient, or consumer, so that they are closely related to the healthcare system in which the product is used. So I think here the industry is conscious that we are only one actor in this chain, and we want to contribute to that, but we are conscious that we are not everything in the hands of the manufacturer. And we know that, and we've heard about that, there are situations at risk of medication errors, and in the era of risk management, we want to be risk proportionate, and these are these situations where more at risk of, for instance, we've heard a lot about the hospital institutions that use complex products such as injectable and complex medication administration processes. I will focus my talk on the devices which are progress for patients, particularly for insulins, but they also raise their own issues with medication errors. And there are also vulnerable populations such as elderly children, illiterate patients, and visually impaired. So it's just an illustration of what a complex medication administration process can be in the hospital. I think the anesthetists know that very well, but it's true that the more complex it is, the more you raise the possibility of medication error. So here is a post-marketing example, what we can do once the product is on the market. And I thank my colleague Michael Richardson for giving me that example. It was mentioned actually by Alma Spooner earlier today. This is about confusion for the paracetamol intravenous infusion, where for children, when you have to give a dose in a patient, in a baby weighing 10 kilos, the dose is 75 milligrams, that is 7.5 milliliters, and that can cause error if you administer 75 milliliters, which is 10 times the dose. And if you know the adverse reactions of paracetamol, of course, can be fatal. And I think you can see here the story and the time it takes. It started in December 2009, where the French agency inquired about 21 overdose cases in neonates due to medication error related to the confusion between milligram and milliliter. So there was a first, let's say, urgent action agreement between the manufacturer and the agency to implement risk minimization measures, which were mainly about information through the HCP letter, the healthcare communication, professional communication. Distribute a poster in the hospitals reminding the pathology in neonates and infants, increasing the font size on the labels, and assess, and there was already a commitment to assess the feasibility of lower strength presentation specific for children. And also the manufacturer committed to report more closely all the cases. And here you have the number of cases before the implementation of this measure and after. Of course, there is a decrease. It's not probably the same period, but at least there is an action, and we are here really in the cycle of risk management to measure the effectiveness of the minimization. And more recently, there were additional risk minimization measures to overcome this problem with labeling information, again, communication to the prescriber, and really development of a new formulation specific for children. This is an example of how we can do. Another example here, which was with the Taxotere formulation. There was previously 2 vials formulation with the product and the solvent, and we developed a new formulation to simplify the medication process, and that's for that, we developed one vial. There was no longer need for dilution before administration into the solution. No initial dilution, but so this is a progress in itself. But the problem was that the change in the formulation could cause medication error, and that was anticipated. Particularly during the switch from the old formulation to the new formulation. So here is an example of communication that was given to the hospital with these visual aids, clearly showing the difference between the 2 formulations and giving instructions to a hospital pharmacist to avoid absolutely to have the 2 formulations on the shelf while they were switching from one to another. You see also here the better differentiation in terms of packaging of the 2 formulations. So here again, designing a better formulation, that's how we do, but also communicate and educate about anticipating potential medication error risk. So here I will come to the experience with the new drug delivery systems, and particularly these insulin pens, which I said is a progress in the treatment of patients, but also can lead to errors. And here are the main errors that have been caused by these new by these administration systems. As for other products, inadequate product differentiation within a product line, but also between similar products from one manufacturer to another. There is unexpected or unusual device operation by the patient when, for instance, he holds the device upside down and gets injured by the needle. There is confusion, and also some of the pens use electronic display of the dose, and there are issues with legibility or message clarity with this type of display. So after evaluating and studying the mix-ups between different types of insulins, the manufacturers have made progress in the differentiation between their products, particularly within their product line, using, as was shown before, the color differentiation, as you can see, but also tactile differentiators between different pens. We've heard about that in the good vigilance practices, the items to be considered pre-marketing. So I'm now coming to how, as manufacturer, we anticipate when we develop a product, we anticipate the medication errors. And here are the 4 areas where we can work: the naming, the instructions for use, the labeling, and I will more insist on the presentation, which is how we design a product to avoid medication errors. This is because we know that product labeling, instruction for use, and healthcare provider and patient education may not be sufficient to overcome product design features that predispose to errors. Historically, manufacturers have not been requested to systematically consider the potential for medication error in the product design, naming, packaging, labeling, and pre-marketing. But except in when this product is combined with direct delivery system, and as we have shown, to correct errors that were detected post-marketing. However, regulations are emerging, and we are here, I think, to guide more for the EU legislation on this. But the USA has also started to work on that, and I would like to go briefly with you through these FDA guidances, which are focused on devices. The initiative of the FDA, as usual, is based on experience. In 2000, there was an Institute of Medicine report in the US showing that there were 7,000 deaths annually attributed to medication error in the US, and the Institute made recommendations for the FDA to develop and enforce standards for the design of drug packaging and labeling, and for pharmaceutical companies to test proposed drug names to identify the sound-alike and look-alike confusion with existing drug names. In 2006, again, the Institute of Medicine reported that labeling and packaging issues cause 33% of medication errors, including 30% of fatalities. And their recommendation there was that product naming, labeling, and packaging should be designed for what they call the end user, which is either the provider in the clinical environment and or the consumer itself. And that the FDA should incorporate the principles of cognitive and human factors engineering to address these issues in their guidance and recommendations. So following that, the FDA is in the process of writing 3 guidance documents to minimize medication errors. And the first has been published as a draft very recently. Design of drug product and container closure. 2 are supposed to come soon. The design of labels, cartoon labeling, packaging configuration, and then the drug product nomenclature. They are really basing these guidances on the experience gained with medical device design optimization through human factor analysis. And these principles are now requests to manufacturers to be applied before the initial approval. So you have to show that you have done something for that, and it is obvious that we need to start early in the development of the product, and also prior to any subsequent product change once the product is on the market. So the medical device experience here is a cartoon to show that there are 2 types of hazards in the use of medical device, those which are failure of the device itself and those which are error in the use. But actually, the root cause analysis shows that it is mainly the interaction between the device design and the use that is causing the error. So the guidance provides what needs to be considered at the early stage of the product design. And there are 3 main things to be considered. First, the end users. This is the name in the guidance, but it's anybody who is in the chain to handle the product, from the patient, the caregiver, the prescribing physician, the nurse, the pharmacist, etc. So here you need to very clearly describe who they will be, do they have differences in age, education, training? How will they have to handle, what is the complexity of the proposed product? Do they need a certain level of education? Do they need specific skill set, etc., etc.? These are how you describe your end users. Then you have also to evaluate and anticipate what is the environment of the use of this product. Will there be, for instance, issues with lighting levels, noise, distractions, where the product is going to be stored, etc., etc. And finally, you have to consider the drug product user interface, and then evaluate the performance of the product and use interactions that can not only rely on controlled clinical trials, which is what we have been done so far, because obviously the clinical trial doesn't reflect the real world. So you need to test proactively using proactive risk assessments, and these are based on all the lessons learned from problems that you have learned previously, and this is why it is so important to collect this experience and capitalize on it. So you need to study really in the real condition of use with the product itself, or at least its prototype, and as well the container, the complete end product that you have to deliver. So what are these proactive risk assessments? The FDA recommends actually two methods: the famous failure mode and effects analysis, the FMEA, and the simulated use testing, where you involve participants, representative participants of the end users, and you do, and it was shown, some examples were shown, direct observation, subjective use feedback, discussions with the users, and you really track all potential medication errors. The industry would like the regulators not to be too prescriptive in those type of errors. And what is sure is that this methodology use what we call human factor engineering methods. FMEA is one of those, but there are others. And for instance, I am going to show you what is used in my company and called the PCA analysis, which is a method, very simple method to identify the potential of error, where you study the perception, what the user, how the user perceives the product, what he thinks, the cognition about the product, and how he acts, how he responds to the use of the product. And you can see here all the details, semantic details of what you can describe. And you have to study the conditions. For instance, how can he perceive, can the end user perceives the product under conditions of bad lighting, noise, fatigue, etc. Then what is important is that you need to do formative evaluations. So each evaluation will learn you, and you have to demonstrate that. And this is to be done, as I said, started early, while the device is still under development. And you test product mock-ups or early prototypes. Early, as I said, in the development. And it's best to perform it iteratively. So repeat the testing during development until the device is considered to be optimized and ready for human validation testing. This is based on risk mitigation. So you need to develop a risk mitigation strategy by which you can modify the interface design in user instructions and other trainings to address the problem that you find in your testing. And then you retest once you have mitigated those risks to demonstrate effectiveness of your mitigation. It's not sufficient to say that your design has been modified to address an error. You have to test again that this was effective. The issue is where to go. I think the perfection is not possible. So residual risk is acceptable if discussed, reasonably limited, and where you really can't do anything in terms of design, and the benefits still outweigh this risk. The human factors usability validation is to demonstrate and provide evidence that you need to bring that to in your submission file, that a medical device as designed can be used safely and effectively by the representative intended users under realistic conditions, and that for critical and essential tasks. You need to provide objective and subjective data about use errors and failures that have been observed and recorded, and the user opinion and feedback, which is collected afterward. In conclusion, we, as industry, have a strategy for prevention of medication errors that really starts, and it's really the basis, I cannot insist more, with an appropriate collection of actual cases to learn from experience, with not only collecting that, but analyzing them appropriately, and it was already said, the root cause analysis of these cases that serve not only post-marketing, but pre-marketing safety assessments. And we know that medication errors are more related to breakdowns in the medication use system than with user competency. And here again, the no blame attitude is important to encourage the collection of those errors. Solutions require certainly standards for the design of drug naming, packaging, and labeling to be applied across the medication system. And here we contribute as best as we can as manufacturers, but it's not only in our hands, and here where the regulator has to play. There is obviously a need to engage all contributors when you design a new product. Prevention during development is based on human factor engineering methods, such as the FMEA and others. Obviously, we can benefit from IT developments, such as electronic prescribing, coding to track the product, audio guide. However, I think even this type of new methods carry their own error risks, I would say. And once we do everything to optimize the design of the product, the packaging, the labeling, but communication and education is still critical even after. And as a conclusion, I would say that an informed patient is one of the best safeguards against medication errors. Thank you for your attention.